Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast. On today's show, I'm pleased to be joined, it's the second time he was on Get a Grip on Lighting as well, Philip Gotthelf. He's a world-renowned authority on energy markets and technologies. His expertise dates back to the original formation of energy futures markets in the 1970s, where he worked directly with the New York Mercantile Exchange to popularize their crude oil and number two heating oil contracts. In response to the first Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970, Philip became a crusader against the five Ps. The pollution targets of 1, air, 2, water, 3, soil, 4, light, and 5, noise. In 1982, he revived Nikola Tesla's magnetic induction light to achieve energy efficiency and longevity while reducing light pollution and protecting soil and water from dispersed mercury contained in fluorescent and HID light bulbs. In 2007, he created a line of modernized MIL under Ultratech Lighting, which is now operating as Tesla Induction Lighting Company, in deference to the great Nikola Tesla, who invented the technology. His design objectives included minimizing glare and light pollution to achieve dark sky compliance without sacrificing visual acuity, creating quiet drivers, i.e. ballast, to address noise pollution such as the 20,000 cycle harmonic that can disturb bats and canines, encapsulating mercury to render it environmentally inert, eliminating high-frequency flicker to eliminate dangers of strobe migraines or even epilepsy, and developing precise spectral tuning to provide the correct wavelengths for specific applications. Tesla Induction Lighting has the only proven white light fixture that does not distract sea turtles like the green and loggerhead. His Snow Bright brand has been approved as dark sky compliant by the Grand Teton Environmental Commission and the University of Wyoming Infrared Observatory. Philip has been an active environmentalist for more than half a century. There you go, Mark. You ready to go with this one?
Wow, Philip, that's impressive. Yes, I'm looking forward to this show.
Philip's not allowed to talk yet because he'll talk when he
Oh,
starts. He's got like a switch on his back. Once you turn him on, he goes
oh,
induction and he starts talking.
I see. Okay, all right.
But before we go there, Mark, give us a quick soft lights update.
Yeah, Michael. So we did another lawsuit against the federal government this week. The Food and Drug Administration and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. I've already sued back in September. And during the course of that lawsuit, I've discovered that the government is withholding documents.
Big surprise.
Yeah, well, not very nice. So they're withholding these documents from the court. Back in 2022, I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to the Food and Drug Administration for all their documents related to this idea of regulating LED products. And after 2 years, they produced one document, which was a post hoc document, which means that they created it after I submitted the FOIA. So because they're withholding, there's probably hundreds of documents. Because they're withholding these documents, I filed a lawsuit this week as a FOIA lawsuit to try and get access to all those records related to discussions and justifying how come the Food and Drug Administration is not regulating any LED product at all.
There's an old adage, history makes men great, great men make history. I don't know, okay? But what I do see with the change of the administration in the United States, whether you like the guy or not, it's not what I'm talking about. There seems to be bubbling up from the grassroots or something coming from the base here that's had enough of the incompetence and skullduggery of our federal agencies in both Canada and the United States. I see it everywhere now, Mark. And you are doing that in your work, and I love it. Go to softlights.org. If you want to support Mark's work, you can donate to his foundation there. I love him. He's a great guy. And so help him out. I would, if I were you, a listener of Restoring Darkness. Philip, welcome to
Yes, sir.
welcome to the Restoring Darkness podcast.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to meet with Mark once again, because we've had some very interesting conversations, and I'm looking forward to working with him at very close range because we share just about every objective in the world of lighting, from making sure that they are healthful for the human peoples of the world, as well as for the environment and, in particular, animal, wildlife, insects, which we
All
never
living things. All living things.
everything,
Yeah, sure.
everything,
Sure.
including Earth itself.
I think
Now,
Earth, I think Earth's alive too. Before I'm trying to drag Mark kicking and screaming into the lighting industry. He doesn't like it, but he's coming. He's coming in. Just quickly before we get into too much of the dark sky stuff, I just want to prosecute something real quick here. How do you induction contains industrial altered methyl mercury as well as fluorescent. How do you encapsulate it? How does that work?
okay, so first of all, you can minimize the amount of mercury that you would put into a fixture by carefully tuning the amount of various gases that you put inside at a non-rarefied. So you're not talking about a vacuum that could implode or a pressurized vessel that could explode. But you guys are too young to remember when dentists used to put silver fillings in our mouths and they'd let us as children play around with the mercury, and it was a fascinating liquid metal substance, and little did we know we were possibly poisoning ourselves. But in any event, the mercury,
Elemental mercury is not as toxic as methyl mercury from fluorescent lamps.
that is
They're
true.
totally different substances. So just
And
for the
so,
listeners, let me just explain this for the listeners
sure.
that this is not a lighting show. So there's a lot of so what happens is when a fluorescent tube gets energized or a HID lamp gets energized, there's a little tiny drop of mercury in the tube, and that mercury vaporizes, and so it becomes lighter than air. So when people break a lamp that's been energized, there's no mercury in the phosphor dust or anything. It all goes up into the air, into the HVAC system, and out into the environment. And then what happens is that it gathers in rain clouds and then rains down on our lakes. And that's how our fish become polluted with mercury. And I think in Canada, I read a study years ago that 6 to 10% of all mercury contamination in Canada's lakes and rivers is from the lighting industry.
Yes. And it comes from three sources. One is the broken bulbs, two is the manufacturing process, and three is in the mining process. So you have three basic sources. You could say maybe they're cheating a little bit because the mining process isn't 100% associated with the lighting industry.
We
But
don't mine mercury anymore though, Philip. We have all the mercury we need because of the export ban. So if you go
man,
to a lamp recycling factory, they got dozens and dozens of mercury containing drums that are
and
just
you're
sitting
making
there.
my point
Oh, okay.
because what we have in our fixture, and I can actually show it because I happen to be prepared for the whole process, is this little itty bitty mercury nub on the side of the lamp right here. I'm not sure you can see that.
I see that. Yeah. So for the listeners that aren't watching, there's a slight tube that comes off the round induction bulb that contains the elemental mercury before it's vaporized.
No, actually, it's an ingenious process where the mercury is encapsulated as an amalgam,
Mm-hmm.
just like using silver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been controversy about silver and mercury fillings leaching some mercury into your body, but for the most part, once it's amalgamated, the only way you're going to get out the atoms of mercury needed to stimulate the phosphorus is through a magnetic field. So you're drawing it out and spinning them in the magnetic field. If the envelope is broken, the chemistry causes the mercury to reassociate with the amalgam before it associates with the general atmosphere. So we don't have the same kind of chemistry as a fluorescent bulb or for that matter, a mercury vapor bulb. We do not have any liquid mercury or vaporized mercury in the function of an induction lamp. And that's
So does it? But you still require demanufacturing of the lamp to capture the mercury amalgam.
right. So that's why instead of putting it inherently within the lamp, we put it in an isolated slug. And induction is the only kind of technology that would allow you to have the mercury so isolated from the functionality of the light, because what we're doing is taking a magnetic field that is more attractive to the mercury atoms in the field than it is to the amalgam that's holding the mercury. It's sort of like osmosis, where you have a pure water solution on one end of the membrane and salt on the other. So the pure water pulls the salt through the osmotic membrane to equalize everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so this process is, as soon as the magnetic field is there, the attraction within the magnetic field is stronger than the amalgam. As soon as the magnetic field dissipates, the attraction of the amalgam is stronger than the interior of the bulb.
So you have this slug of mercury that can be cut out of the lamp and shipped on its own to and then all you have is phosphorus
Actually,
left?
that's what we do. We originally put a metallized plastic bag with every lamp that we sold. So our philosophy, by the way, is cradle to the grave production. And one of our crusades, which is not associated with light, is that for every, within your life cycle should be the recycle. No matter what product you're making, a car, a piece of plastic, within your product life cycle should be the recycle. And that's the way we run our business. Once that mercury slug is snapped off, and we actually score it, and that makes it easy to, you won't cut yourself. You know,
Well,
it won't.
what Philip's referring to here for the listeners is that the major issue with lamp recycling or mercury recovery in the lighting industry is that the bulbs cannot be broken before they get to the mercury management facility. So in my warehouse here, I have massive tombs filled with fluorescent lamps that I gather up from customers, and it fills up to about a tractor trailer size, and I have to ship a whole tractor trailer to the lamp recycling factory. With Philip's situation, I could probably do the same amount of lamps and put them in a box and ship a box to the factory. So that's the innovation that he's talking about. I think that's a really, really solid innovation. Before we move on to darkness restoration, Mark Baker, I know that's where you want to go. Before we get there, I want to tell everybody that old cemeteries are the most toxic waste places in the world, because all the mercury is leaching out of they started taking out the mercury sometime, I can't remember, but there's leaching mercury from cemeteries, so that's a big problem. But anyway, now they take all the fillings out when they prepare the body. So mercury is a serious problem. I don't know when they started taking it out, but I know that it wasn't always that way, and I know that cemeteries are major mercury deposits in North America and probably Europe as well. How does your bright white light fixture, the bright white, what was it called here? You called it Snow Bright. So you're actually delivering lumens at 5,000 Kelvin. How are these
Actually,
or how are these actually not people that's going against the grain here? I'm gonna in the thrust of this show.
well, it's going against some of the grain. But one of the things that really, and I said this to Mark when we first met electronically, I said, I love the fact that you've used the word soft, because from a technical perspective, there are three aspects of lighting. The one that most of us are familiar with is cool and warm. And cool and warm pertain to the temperature, color temperature in Kelvin of the lamp. So a cool lamp actually has a higher Kelvin temperature, and a warm lamp has a lower Kelvin temperature. And as we all know, and hopefully your listeners understand, a sodium lamp that is highly yellow-orange has a low Kelvin, warm temperature. And a white light that would be in the range of 5,000 Kelvin or above is considered a cool light, but it has a higher Kelvin temperature. But the word that Mark uses from our perspective expeditiously is soft. And soft technically pertains to intensity. And so you can have a white light that goes all the way up to 20,000 Kelvin. The temperature of a bright sunny day without a cloud in the sky, and you're in almost direct sunlight. But if you're off center from that light, let's say you're behind a building, the intensity of the light decreases. So the spectrum remains the same, but the lux, the lumens, decreases. And so the lower the intensity, the softer the light. And softness can pertain to light temperatures as orange as a candle, or as intense as a diamond dealer looking at a diamond under the northern light. So what we discovered in the Snow Bright fixture, and the reason why it's got so much notoriety, is that there's also something called the refraction index of an element and the reflective index of an element. And as crazy as this sounds, and I know Mark agrees with me because we've discussed it briefly, the lighting engineers and industry don't care a hoot about these aspects of light categorization. So when our light is tuned to 6,500 Kelvin, literally 6,500 Kelvin, that would be considered an incredibly blue and disturbing light by today's standards, because the comparisons are made to LEDs and mercury lamps and the old HID lamps, which would be not sodium in this case, would be metal halide. What we do, though, is we take the blue portion of the spectrum, the high energy portion of the spectrum, and we blast it in all directions from the center of the lamp, so that by the time it hits the snow, you have enough intensity for the eye to use the higher energy light and to gain contrast on the snow, but not enough energy to leave the snow and go into the sky. So it's a matter of taking the time to do the engineering to make sure that the snow stays, excuse me, not the snow, the light stays where you want it to be and doesn't go anywhere else. And the thing that's so intriguing about that is that for the ski industry, LEDs are really like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. The glare is so intense. The glare is so intense that it's like a flashlight against a mirror. Item number 2, if a child is intrigued by looking at the LEDs and getting the little dots in his or her eyes, they're damaging their eye. It's not funny. They don't understand that that's a dangerous thing. It's like looking at the sun. Item number 3, all LED lighting, including metal halide for that matter, have to face down the mountain because you can't look at them. So you're being illuminated from your back, which automatically throws a shadow in front of you, so you're not seeing the snow that you're skiing on. Whereas our induction lighting, and I'm hoping that Mark can verify this, can be viewed directly at the right distance. Obviously, Mark and I talked about that. But if that light is up on a 35-foot tower facing you, and you are, say, another 100 feet away, you can literally look at the light without being blinded. And one of the reasons for that actually has to do with the fact that this source is 360 degrees around and 360 degrees tubular. So there's a huge surface producing light.
Mark, he's talking about that mixing I was telling you about.
Exactly, Michael.
That's what
Right?
he's
I'm,
talking
I'm
about.
nodding my head because this is exactly what we've been talking about. The problem with LEDs, it's directional, it's an intense. So Philip is telling us exactly what we want to hear. Keep going, Philip.
Now, the other thing that we did, which is our patented technology, is if you look, we have a cone in the middle of this light that takes advantage of all the light that's being produced on the interior. So we're taking 100% of the light produced by this multi-directional curvilinear geometry and throwing it out to the sides of this fixture. So I can literally block this fixture and the light still comes out.
I don't. I don't believe the coefficient of utilization of that fixture is 100%.
No, 100%?
You said 100. You said 100%. It's not
No,
100%.
no. Let me put it this way. We're using 100% of the geometry
Okay. Okay, I get it. That's okay.
to achieve the maximum efficiency.
Okay. Which would be like
Therefore,
70% would be the coefficient.
70, sometimes higher. We have
Okay.
designs that are higher, but you know, when you get past 60, you're doing well.
A 4-foot T12 tube that you would have had in your school when you were a kid is about 30% coefficient of utilization. A T8
Right.
fluorescent tube is like 60%. A T5 is 70 or 80%.
Now, here's the interesting thing about that. So in 1982, I was working with an engineer, Sidney Levy. May he rest in peace. He was the man who wrote the plastics engineering handbook. He was sort of the guru of plastics engineering in all aspects. And Sid Levy and I were working on the first energy crisis. Again, hopefully you guys aren't old enough to remember the first energy crisis. And we were working with fluorescent tubes, and fluorescent tubes have the same geometry in one direction. They're tubular. At least, you know, they were tubular back then. I'm not talking about the curly Q, that came later. And I said to Sid, gee, you know, when I used to go to school, we used to have auditorium day, and they'd show us slideshows and films on a very reflective surface, which was manufactured by DuPont, and it was sort of a micronized mica on canvas. And they would pull the screen down, and we would all watch the movie or whatever it was. We ordered that material from DuPont, put it in the back of a fluorescent fixture, and got 20% more light out of the exact same fixture. And
Okay.
there
So I wanna ask you some questions though about the color temperature, unless you got some, Mark, first. But I got some darkness restoration questions for him. You want to go first?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe now I would like to tell a little story related to Philip and my
Okay.
experiments, if
Okay, go
that's all
for
right.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Philip, there's two experiments I did. One was with your product and one was with a bollard that I recently bought. I'm going to tell the bollard story first. So, as an experiment, I bought a bollard. It's about 3 feet tall. It's got louvers on it. And I made sure that I bought one that I could replace the bulb inside. I think a lot of these bollards now have LEDs soldered in. And so if they go bad, you have to throw out the whole bollard. So I made sure I could screw in a light bulb. So then I set it up and wired it so that I could have an extension cord and plug it in and move it around and try experiments. And so I put in LED, an amber stick type LED, 300 lumens, so not very bright. And when I stood close to the bollard when it was standing up, it was great. Not very much light, but all I needed to see. That's all I need to do is get out of my car and get to my house. It was perfect. But as I stepped away from the bollard, like you're talking about your snow bright, I could see the bulb itself, and it was too intense. This like beam thing, and it was bothersome and painful actually. So I didn't like it, even though it was amber. And then I tried a frosted amber. That one was clear glass, and it had the same problem, even though it had frosting on the bulb. So then I got a 2800 Kelvin incandescent, which I think has some halogen in it. So it's not just a straight tungsten filament. And it kind of looked the same, even though it was 2800 Kelvin, it kind of had the same light. But when I stepped away from the bollard, I didn't have that intensity problem. I didn't have that pain. It was like, oh, like the old days, right? Just this light. And so I've been talking, and Michael and I have been talking about this distribution of this light. This is what the industry, like, it's driving me crazy. You seem to get it, that the LED industry doesn't understand. This directional light that is so painful, that LED streetlights that are everywhere with their bare arrays and everything that are just so debilitating, and we can't look at it. I have all kinds of supporters contacting me, Mark, I can't look at the light like the old high pressure sodiums, right? So then, just for the audience here, Philip sent me one of his big streetlights with the induction lighting. It was pretty fun to get because it's so big. It's not household size. So that was pretty fun, unwrapping it and trying to get it to turn on and stuff like that. So we didn't know what to expect exactly, although because it's not an LED, it's not directional, I was expecting it to be okay. And for our audience, it was bright. I was standing close to it when I turned it on, and I was like, "Oh, ow, that's a little bit bright," but not anyway like an LED. Nothing like an LED. So I took it outside. I set it up on a barn and stuff, and then did some experiments to see. It was just a comfortable light, like I would fully expect. So if I was a skier, if I was a golfer, or something like that, this pain that LEDs causes, that's not there with this induction lighting. And maybe we can talk here further in the show about sort of the white thing. But I didn't have the neurological, the psychological adverse reactions with this magnetic induction lighting. And that's what that's to me is the most problematic with LEDs. It's directional. And Phil has just shown us how spreading it all out, bouncing it all around, diffusing it and stuff, and making it go in every direction, that's what humans need for lighting.
So I excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. I have some questions. Okay, so
I'm ready.
um, you can make induction lights in lower Kelvin temperature, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right. I don't know how low you can go, but we have fluorescent tubes that are warm white, 2650 Kelvin, and maybe you can go lower with the phosphors. Um,
We've gone down to 1500 and 1200.
okay.
Oh, wow.
So there, one of the things that when Mark and I met years ago, we first met and we did a podcast, and we didn't release the podcast. I don't know if you remember that, Mark, back in the old
Yeah.
Starving for Darkness days.
Right.
But the there's a multitude of various issues that are sometimes interconnected and then sometimes not. So like some of the issues are the intensity, the glare. Sometimes the issue is flicker. And then I believe that there's other issues as well to do with blue light and the nanometers of blue light. And so we're talking about a mixture of frailties that LED imposes onto humans when it's used as electric light at night. Okay. Um, but I also think there's an element of this of beauty. And I don't think white light is beautiful at night. I don't think I like it. And I now maybe on a ski hill I wouldn't care. You know what I'm saying? Like on your when you told me about the ski hill, maybe that's the right color for a ski hill. It stays on till 10 o'clock or something like that and goes off. But I also think there's a problem with color of light. Even if it doesn't have the nanometers, and even if it's not flickering and its radiance, as Mark Baker says, is not so intense. I think the color is a problem as well. Do you agree with that, Philip?
I agree with it because of the nature of color production in modern solid state lighting. And let me give you an example. My mother had three-way 100, 200, 300 watt incandescent bulbs that she read by in the corner of our living room. It was her little spot where she would like to read. And in that spot, there was also a corner window. So in the daytime, she'd lift the shade, turn the light out, and read by sunlight, indirect. And in the evening, she would go 100, 200, 300 and read by the incandescent bulb. I coincidentally had a copy of what bulb she was using, which was in the old days when GE made bulbs, we might remember. And the color temperature of that bulb was called cool white. It was rated at about 7,000 Kelvin at 300 watts. And the Kelvin dropped slightly from 200 watts to 100 watts, which for me, I thought that was kind of unusual. But it had to do with the glow of the filament as the amount of energy made the filament hotter and therefore whiter. So I wasn't going to argue with it, but I didn't have a point of reference. When we're doing our ski lighting, for example, there are important elements of high energy blue light when you're dealing with a pure white surface, which is crystalline and highly reflective. And so it turns out that if you eliminate the blue spectrum in a snow bright light, if we were to do that and go with orange, you would not be able to see the various contours of the snow because it's monochromatic, and the way the eye works is it needs to have some form of color rendition in order to make a distinction between a surface that would be pure white like snow. Now, the question becomes, how in the world do you get a dark sky compliant lamp that's rated on the meter at 6,500 Kelvin? And as the three of us know, and hopefully members of the audience, 6,500 Kelvin is a gross measurement. I can fool the meter 7 ways to Sunday to say 6,500 Kelvin while I'm mixing it up in terms of the various wavelengths that I've got in my lamp. And it all has to do with how you treat the blue light in the lamp. So now,
Hang on a second here, because this is another thing that came up on a previous show that we did that was very popular. The Dr. Mata episode that we released on the 2nd. The Kelvin scale is a scale that was employed by blacksmiths in England in the 17th and 18th century in order to understand the heat of the steel they were heating. So the more they heated the steel up, they changed the color.
The whiter it got. Right?
Do we need to just get rid of the Kelvin scale altogether? Is it useful, in your opinion?
It's a generalization. It's a generalization because what you know, if you're trying to produce a grow light is not the same thing as a light that you'd use in education. Philips did experiments in Germany and found out that autistic children actually perform better and are calmer under a light that, believe it or not, rates at 15,000 Kelvin. 15,000 Kelvin.
That's purple.
It would seem to be purple, but we can produce, and I turn to my good friend Mark. He's looking at a 6,500 Kelvin light, and it does not look as purple as all of the other 6,500 Kelvin. If you were to look at a 6,500,
but you just said I don't even know if there is a 15,000. Doesn't it stop at 10,000? The scale?
No, we have a 10,000 light ourselves, but you can get a 15,000 fluorescent fixture. It's all a matter of how you tune it. So what I'm trying to impart on you and the audience is that Kelvin, yes, is probably a completely ridiculous way of measuring. We need much more sensitive instrumentation, spectral instrumentation to tune. I'll give you some examples. And you could go to Google Scholar and you can look up everything I'm talking about. I can make you want dessert in a restaurant by changing the light over your table. I can actually generate a sweet tooth with the variance in the spectrum over the table. I can make you anxious by flickering the light and changing it to an intense purple light. And here's the thing that Mark, I'm sure appreciates, although all three of us are gentlemen to the best of my knowledge. 17, 17% of the female population are have tetrachromatic vision, which means they see in four colors. And the fourth color is the deep purple range. And one of the reasons why women have more trouble now with LEDs than any man does is that 17% of the population is plagued by the spectral imbalance presented by solid state lighting. And how do I know this is a problem? Well, I was at a seminar where they were using deep purple light as a germicidal treatment for rooms on a 24-hour basis. And I looked at the spectrum, which, by the way, happened to be dead smack where the non-visual ganglia stimulate or don't stimulate our pineal glands. And I'm saying to the ophthalmologist, hey, isn't that where tetrachromatic people see? And the whole room turned the color of my wall because they were absolutely stunned that all the scientists in the room hadn't thought of this fundamental fact of human vision.
So hang on. You're talking about humans sitting around under a system of germicidal UV surface disinfection lamps?
Yes, but they weren't UV. They were near UV. So, as you probably know, high energy
That's a really bad
discourages.
idea. I don't care what anybody says in safety testing. No, like I did a deep dive into UV, and I know a lot about how UV disinfection works. It's not, I know a lot about it, and it's just not a good idea to do surface disinfection using general lighting systems in schools and these places. It's just a bad idea. It's not a good idea.
Well,
Air disinfection, on the other hand, that's a whole different story. But
right.
the surface disinfection, so you're in this room, people are being hit by this very unnatural, bizarre, you say it's not UVC, but I don't know what it is. Then they say there's some nanometers that's perfect in between. I don't believe
It's
that.
just above UVA.
If it kills bacteria, it hurts you. You have bacteria on your skin. You are a walking superorganism. I read a National Geographic about it. And so people are having all the bacteria on their skin killed by this germicidal UV. And you're saying that some people are capable of seeing the UV light?
Tetrachromatic vision can see that kind of deep purple. It's part of, and they're still studying the crap out of tetrachromatic and synesthesia people to try to determine how to accommodate this particular disability, or in this case, this gift. And what Mark and I were talking about ourselves was, we have a diverse population. We have people who are colorblind. We have people who are very sensitive to light. We have people who couldn't give a darn about light. We have people who are artists, and we have people who are just generalists. And every one of us reacts to our environment differently, from musicians to music, from artists to light, from you and me, daily activity. And the lighting industry is formed out of one philosophy: one light fits all. Thomas Edison told Tesla, go shove this forever bulb somewhere where the sun doesn't shine, because the model was a business model. We want the bulb to burn out. And
I
our
love
bulb,
that business. I love that business. I used to ship bulbs, like boxes of bulbs, like crazy, buddy. I'm with Edison, but
okay,
hang on. I loved
you and I
selling
got a problem.
I love selling light bulbs. That was great. The half in jest, of course. This is my question for you, and this is
Sure.
going to be your opinion, and we'll accept it here on the show without, but it might be a bit of a controversial question. Does the lighting industry have any idea what it's doing?
No, plain and simple, no. They don't. I'll tell you what, it's not their fault. It's not their fault.
Well, I'm sorry, Phil. Can I just interrupt? Just are you part of the lighting industry?
Unfortunately, I am I am involved in the lighting industry.
Okay.
Confession,
All right.
true confession. There's
All right.
nothing
All
I
right.
can
Thanks.
do about that. But I'm
Okay.
an
All right.
evolutionary. I'm an evolutionary in the sense that I want to approach lighting in an evolving way, and I'm a revolutionary in the fact that I'm going back to 1890 technology invented by Tesla. And yes, the business model is I love selling bulbs. That's the business model. But the sustainability model is I don't want to be filling landfills up with dead bulbs. And in the case of LEDs, let's be perfectly honest when it comes to the five pollutions. Like LEDs, light pollution. LEDs make a 20,000 cycle hum that can kill bats like crazy. That's noise pollution. LEDs have aluminum gallium indium, which is toxic. Aluminum phosphate, which is toxic, highly toxic. Indium gallium nitrate, highly toxic. Gallium arsenide, incredibly toxic. Aluminum gallium arsenide, insanely toxic. Now, the LED industry says, but it's in very, very, very small quantities. But when you're deploying tens of millions of fixtures, it's not small quantities. And you might have seen that Netflix has some kind of a documentary on recycling. And basically, we're not recycling because this stuff would cost so much money to effectively recycle that we just throw it off into these bins and it gets
No,
sent.
it's even worse than that. You're entering my field of expertise, which is light fixture recycling and mercury containing lamp recycling. It is impossible to do anything with failed LED fixtures for many reasons. But and hopefully that's going to change. But the lighting industry went from having an underused end of life system known as light bulb demanufacturing or lamp recycling. It's not really recycling, but it's demanufacturing to capture the mercury. That's what it's about.
Right.
It's not recycling.
Because mercury's expensive.
It's not anymore. There's lots of mercury out there now because of the export ban. But they're just trying to capture the mercury. That's the entire process is about that. There's nothing you can do with the glass. The phosphor is largely stored. You can't get the rare earths out of the phosphor. It's very difficult. So there's no recycling going on precisely. But what we're talking about is we went from a system where end of life, there was an underused but available end of life system. Fixtures were already a dream for anybody thinking about the circular economy. Like if you're actually considering circular economy, the lighting industry was one of the best industries for that. And you could change bulbs, you could change ballast. Everything was made by ANSI standards and NEMA standards. Everything was interbrand compatible. And now they're talking about circular economy. Why is the lighting industry talking about circular economy? Because we've gone 180 degrees in the other direction as fast as we can for 12 years.
Right. Right. So one of the things that we philosophically concentrate on are the original 5 Ps, 5 pollutions of Earth Day, and the concentration on efficacy or efficiency, energy efficiency. And Tesla there got into a fight with Edison again because Edison wanted to sell electricity, and Tesla's bulb was producing, even at that time, 75 to 85 lumens per watt. And he was painting the inside of his tubes with phosphorus as opposed to a modern thin spray technology to make the phosphorus more responsive. So standard induction bulbs produce 75, 85 lumens per watt. Our bulbs produce 95 to 105 lumens per watt. Oh, how did you do that? Well, how about just polishing the interior of the bulb and making sure that the phosphorus coatings are uniform? Things, very easy technology, but I don't want to get off track. The reality here is the next great hurdle, which is managing spectrums for application specificity. Our lights are application specific. So if we read research that shows turtles see in various wavelengths, and you want to have a turtle safe life so that you can illuminate a port or a beach, then you tune the light to the appropriate spectrum output. And no one is doing that. And the reason they're not doing that is because it's not an economic model And by the way, our environment cannot be sacrificed to economic models because the cost in the long run is far greater than the benefits of the immediate economic model. And you can make money with both. You can make money with both. And that's one of the objectives. That's the absolute bottom line philosophy of our operation. Now, we had enough courage to ship with hardly an education a fixture to Mark because we want Mark to be able to understand that amber is a very comfortable light. Anything under 4,000 Kelvin, lower and lower and lower, is comfortable because, by the way, that's called the sleep spectrum. Plain and simple, it's the sleep spectrum. But the problem is and I talked to the IES about this, ophthalmologists and optometrists and neurologists now understand, because there's a huge problem with these extraordinarily white, bright headlamps, LED headlamps.
Don't get Mark
That, by the way,
started on the headlamps, okay? We'll be here for
well,
another hour. Let me interrupt you here because I want to bring it back to Mark, and then I got a couple other questions that I want to finish up with that I think are interesting. I want to get your point on. Mark, go ahead. If you don't have anything, I'll just move.
Well, okay. First, just because it was on my mind, back to correlated color temperature, CCT, and the metal, heated metal. Just as a reminder, so that before it used to be called color temperature, that was the actual black body radiator that matched color. The heated metal matched some kind of color. But with other technologies that are not black body radiators, there's this correlated color temperature. So that's even another like dereference from the metalworking people. And then really LEDs have different intensities. It's not uniform in intensity. So it's kind of like you might say a correlated color temperature. And so it just shows you how far off this kind of number is to have it try a single number. It's just not practical. So yeah, we need a spectral power distribution at least on the label so we can see the spectral, and we really need it to go beyond just visible. We really need to see in the UVA, UVB, UVB, and the infrared sides so that we can really understand the impact of this light on our lives. So, okay, back to Phil. So, Phil, when you sent me that light, I kind of complained a little bit. I mean, I loved it, right? But I kind of complained a little bit because it's like, well, I don't really want such a white-ish light outside. It wasn't affecting me too much, but I would still prefer a high-pressure sodium or a low-pressure sodium for me than this white light. So, Michael asked you about this possibility of amber. Could I ask you that again? So, can the magnetic induction lighting have, let's say, a 2,000 Kelvin color temperature?
yes. So what we have is a technology called Lumen Tech. It's a trademark of ours. And what it allows us to do is change the spectral output uh, intensity in increments of very few nanometers. So we can literally smooth out our green yellow transition, for example, which is very helpful for the visual effective lumens that the human eye uses more effectively. Now, here's the thing that I was just about to talk about, the intense headlamps that are LED. What we know is that if you put amber lights on the sides of the street and you're going down the street with that high intensity LED, your mind is going to shut off what's on the side and only going to concentrate
Yeah.
on what's in the center. That has been found to cause enormous numbers of accidents amongst pedestrians and deer and things like that because by the time you see the deer, if the light were white on both sides of the road,
Mm.
you would see the deer. But because there's the amber white contrast and it's so intense, you don't see the deer. Now, here's what we discovered. which is that we want to create for street lighting a comfortable soft white light that absolutely doesn't intrude past the intended target field, so that we have safety and comfort.
Hmm.
When we're off target, that's when we start lowering temperature. For example, we talked to the Grand Teton Environmental Commission. They were stunned that we were able to comply dark sky with a white light.
So
Stunned. But what they discovered was they called in a lighting engineer from Texas who did a spectral analysis on their amber LEDs that were at 2200 Kelvin, and the blue was still there.
yeah, that's why the Kelvin temperature is a misleading number as well, because you can still have the 479 nanometers in the 2700 Kelvin. It can still be there to a certain extent. I don't know all the science on that. That's just what I know. I want to ask. So you said that you don't think it's anybody's fault. Um,
Well, what I mean is, it's if you talk to a lighting engineer and you start talking biology, they have no idea what you're talking about. The ophthalmologists and the optometrists and the neuroscientists who know the hormonal impacts of lighting aren't in IES.
Yeah, but that's not an excuse to my mind. The IES is a standard setting association, and they have an obligation to go and reach out to these people. It's not the other way around. So a standards body has an obligation. If they're going to set the standards for lighting, they can't, oh yeah, we're the standards body. We're the best at this. We're the engineers. But, oh shoot, we didn't know that. Huh. We didn't read that study or that study or that study or that study or that study. We're not interested in that. You guys don't know anything about lighting. So I disagree with you on that. The next point I want to make to you, I want to ask you about, is that the 5Ps, pollution targets: air, water, soil, light, and noise. One of the things that concerns me in the night preservation movement or the darkness restoration movement is it's completely crowded out by climate change. And climate
Absolutely.
and climate change is not something that really affects anybody very much. Okay? The Maldives are still above water. Okay? You know what I'm saying? Like, if the Maldives are not underwater by the time I die, I'm going to be really feel like I was duped. Okay? So I don't know anything about that, whether climate change is this enormous threat to everything and all that sort of stuff. But it's something intangible. Light pollution hurts people. It hurts animals. It causes problems. And fixing light pollution will contribute to whatever greenhouse gas emissions you want to reduce. By saving energy and doing a good job, you're going to have less. It actually contributes to the climate change crowd. Why are people so obsessed with a inert gas that is in the air all the time, that doesn't affect anybody, doesn't affect human health at all? There's no acute, I got hurt, I'm sick with climate change. I got sick today with climate change. Like,
Actually, you're touching on a subject that is finally coming to light, no pun intended, because the greening of the planet has now caused a tipping point in the opposite direction of what they're discussing. We now have more greening in the world, to the point where the amount of CO2 that we're able to produce is being absorbed on a balanced basis by the canopies of the Brazilian jungles all the way down
I don't
to
want
the
to get
savannah.
into I don't want to get into an argument about climate change. I mean, you'll never win those
No,
arguments. You
but
go on
here's the
forever.
issue.
Yeah.
The issue is this: it's when you're talking about environmentalism, you cannot just talk about carbon dioxide. It wasn't even a subject during the 5P argument. And the reality is that LEDs. Let me give you something that I'm sure you're aware of. When you turn an LED on, the inrush current can be as high as a metal halide. To get that gap to jump, to turn the LED on, has a very high inrush current. So you have the demand for electricity on the onstart of these lamps is still there. So you have to still have the capacity from your power generating plant to run these LEDs to turn them on. That's demand charge on your bill. I don't know about it.
Okay,
And, you know,
I'm not sure that that's a fact, but I've tested it many times and I don't see that on my testing. But I don't know if I have the right test equipment. You could be right. I don't know. But here's what I'm going to say: when it comes to electricity, we treat electricity the same as we're filling up a pot. We want it to be like gas, right? How much gas did I use? How much kilowatt hours did I use? That doesn't mean anything. Demand is all that matters when it comes to electricity generation. Electricity is produced on demand. And if it's not used, it needs to be burned off somewhere. So it doesn't matter how much anybody ever uses in Ontario or California or whatever electrical infrastructure you have. It matters what the overall demand is at any moment. That's all that matters. That's why energy efficiency lighting programs are called conservation demand management. That's why they're called that.
You're charged for what you might need, not for what you
But
use.
not enough. You should only be charged for your peak demand. They should totally change the way electricity is charged, but that's a whole different story. What I'm concerned about with climate change is that listen, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not saying that people should not focus on the reduction of carbon emissions. I don't know anything about that. But what I'm going to say is that it's not tactile or tangible. Nobody gets sick with climate change. That never happens. Mark Baker is suffering from LED lighting, and it's bad. We have disposable certified garbage in our lights. That's going to come out, go right to not to landfill. You can recycle them, but whatever. There's nothing we can do with those materials. They get shredded. Okay, the plastic bits go to the landfill, and the metal bits get melted down and reused. Okay, that's what happens with LED light fixtures. But this focus on this unbelievable amount of sums is starting to make me think, like, if you're a climate change person out there and you're focused on that, light pollution is your issue right now. Okay? Light pollution is the number one issue. If you're a climate changer, you should be focused 100% on light pollution, because that will deliver tons of carbon emissions reductions.
But it's more than that. It's more than that in this sense. If you use a high power LED and you cause all of the insects to emerge at the wrong time in the wintertime and they drop dead, and then the birds starve in the summertime because there's not enough insect population to support them, you want to talk about a catastrophe. You're talking about a catastrophe. If you take the bats out of circulation because they're crashing into trees and buildings, because the high-pitched harmonic coming out of an LED driver is interfering with their navigation, you're affecting the environment in many more potent ways than if you are talking about a few extra pounds of CO2. The priorities since Al Gore came out with his Inconvenient Truth have been turned on their head. Look, in 1978...
No, they have not. I'm sorry. That's wrong. All major Western countries, and probably some in the global South as well, are running as quickly as spending as much money as they can on reducing carbon emissions. That's what's happening. You can say that it's completely wrong. I don't know. Okay, I'm not arguing against climate change or anything like that.
But look, the carbon, the attempt to regulate carbon at the expense of a lithium mine, of a cobalt mine, of these unbelievable polluting operations to get the batteries, to get the parts, to get the magnets. If you're going to want to balance it in terms of an environmental impact, well, I got news for you. Stop worrying about carbon emissions and start worrying about overall pollution. There was never a red tide associated with carbon pollution. It has to do with killing and multiplying algae. I'm afraid of herbicides that flow down the fields of our farmers, get into our rivers, and go into the ocean. Do you know the number one producer of oxygen in this globe? It's algae, ocean algae. And so if we kill all the ocean algae, we're gone. If we kill all the insects, we're gone.
Let me just make this point, and I want all the listeners, and then we're going to close it down, okay? Light pollution is disgusting. We have to.
Terrible.
It is so gross. If people knew how many birds are killed, and just like this is a catastrophe. And you know what? It's time for the leaders of the lighting industry to just say, sorry, you're right, Mark Baker. Not on everything, but on these 5 points, you're correct. And so it's disgusting. It's ugly. It is damaging to people's health. It hurts animals. This is a catastrophe, and the lighting industry has to solve this problem.
And by the way,
ASAP.
here's the if you want to know the ultimate takeaway of this podcast, it is intensity. You don't need 200 lumens per watt to light somebody's front lawn. You don't need those kinds of intense headlamps.
But listen,
If
the
you have
leaders, but listen, the leaders in the industry were only focused on lumens per watt from 2005 or 3 or something like that, all the way to about 2023. That's all they
but
cared about. All the
but
accreditations were about lumens per watt.
you can kill somebody with lumens per watt. You can blind children with lumens per watt. And then if you go and you take a prismatic lens to reduce the intensity of the light, your lumens, your efficacy flushes down the toilet, if you excuse the expression, because now your lumens per watt are meaningless. It's the amount of light that comes out of the fixture in its totality. And so I'm working with Mark because I'd like Mark to help me work on standards of comfort for those applications that require a whiter light. That's all. I mean, amber has its place, generally speaking, but you can't put an amber light on in an airfield where they're repairing equipment. But you don't want that airfield to pollute the entire area. So how much light, gentlemen, do you need to see what you're doing? And the softer the light, which is why I was so thrilled with the name soft light, because that is the whole point of our technology. We want to soften the light no matter what the temperature. I can soften a 10,000 Kelvin lamp because it's being deployed on blacktop, whereas I would use a 6,500 Kelvin lamp on concrete, white top. Why? Because the reflective nature of asphalt and concrete are diametrically different, but I can get the same visual effect without polluting the entire neighborhood and sky with an unnecessary amount of intensity. And so when I'm with Mark, I consider it like
Mark, star is
a gift,
rising. Mark,
a
star
gift
is
from heaven.
rising.
No, because also I need his skepticism. He likes amber light, and I understand that. And so I want to work with him on all of the applications because he would be so good for me in the ski industry because there are ski mountains that are using LEDs and they're destroying the night sky. And if Mark would go to these major mountain corporations like
I'm going
Vail
to correct
Resorts,
you right there. I'm going to correct you right there. There's other organizations that are after our celestial heritage. Okay, Dark Sky International does a great job with that. But you know what we're doing here on Restoring Darkness, Philip? We're looking down on the light pollution from above. And we're saying, how do we fix that down there? And Dark Sky does a great job with preserves and helping the night sky. But in this particular show, we're focused on pollution abatement. And it's a very serious problem. Mark Baker, final thoughts to you. Light pollution is pollution, brother.
Wow. I've learned so much on this show. I'm kind of in awe. Phil, it's great to meet you, and I look forward to collaborating with you more. We're very much in alignment. I loved hearing this word intensity. And this is something we need to get out into the lighting industry. This intensity problem, let's work on it.
Folks, you can help out Soft Lights Foundation by going to softlights.org. We got some big announcements coming from the Restoring Darkness podcast real soon, Mark Baker. Not ready yet, but we're going to put out some big announcements. And of course, great thanks to our friend Philip Gotthelf for being a guest on Get a Grip on Lighting. You can go check out getagriponlighting.com. I can't remember what episode it was, but it's a couple months ago. And so you just scroll down, you'll find it. And it's a sort of a different conversation over there. But then also being a guest with Restoring Darkness. We really appreciate you, Philip. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. And remember, less light is more.